If you're here, then you share my fascination with the island nation of Trinidad and Tobago. In this first episode of our series, All About Trinidad, we will delve into the history of Trinidad from its origins with the indigenous peoples to the present day. This is a place that has been described as the most diverse square mile on the planet, and this is no exaggeration at all. When you take a walk down the streets of Port of Spain, you will find people of every color imaginable. So what makes this country so wonderfully diverse? Well, that's what we'll be looking at today. But before we begin, please subscribe to our channel. We make weekly videos about islands, and some of them are even about Trinidad and Tobago. You can also check out more of our content after this video, which will be linked in the description below. Anyway, let's start off by talking about how Trinidad got its name. It comes from the Spanish word trino, which means small three-mast hot sailing ship. This was used to describe the ships that were used by Sir Walter Raleigh when he explored the island in 1498, but it was until 5 years later that Trinidad was officially discovered by the Spanish, who named it Isla de la Trinidad, or the Island of Trinity. The name Trinidad then became anglicized over time, and the island S-shape reminded the Spanish of a canoe, hence the name was changed to Trinidad. Originally, Trinidad was inhabited by several small tribes of Arawak and Carib-speaking peoples. However, these tribes had no written language, so we don't know too much about them. What we do know is that they lived in small villages and subsisted mainly on hunting, fishing, and gathering fruits and vegetables. They also wore simple clothing made from the bark of trees and leaves. These indigenous people were generally peaceful and had no knowledge of iron or steel tools. They did, however, have a rudimentary understanding of medicine and used herbs and plants to treat various ailments. Unfortunately for them, when Christopher Columbus arrived in Trinidad in 1498, he brought with him diseases that the natives had no immunity to. These European diseases devastated the native population, and within a few decades, there were very few indigenous people left on the island. Following this, the Spanish began to enslave the remaining natives, forcing them to work on plantations growing crops such as tobacco, cotton, and sugar. After the Spanish discovered that there was not enough land to grow all of their desired crops on the island, they decided to bring in African slaves instead. This marked the beginning of a long and brutal chapter in Trinidad's history. For the next 2 centuries, the island was used as a base for the Spanish slave trade, with thousands of Africans being transported across the Atlantic Ocean to work on the sugar plantations. The Spanish also introduced cattle, pigs, and horses to the island, which eventually led to the creation of ranches. The majority of the Spanish settlers were actually of African descent, as was the majority of the population at this time. In fact, according to the 1834 census, there were only 673 Europeans on the entire island, while there were 34,000 Africans and 6,000 of mixed race. In the early 18th century, France became a major power in Trinidad, and the island was a part of the French colony of Espagne. During this time, the economy was based mainly on agriculture, with sugar, cocoa, and coffee being the main exports. The French also built roads, bridges, and other infrastructure during their time on the island. However, by the end of the 18th century, France had become exhausted of the island and had begun to neglect it. This led to a decline in the economy and a loss of interest in developing Trinidad further. As the 19th century approached, Trinidad became a battleground between the British and Spanish. Both sides wanted to claim the island as their own, and it was not until 1814 that the British finally defeated the Spanish and took control of Trinidad. At this point, the British began to see the potential of the island and began to invest heavily in its development. They built new roads, schools, and hospitals, and they also abolished slavery in 1834. This had a huge impact on the demographics of the island, as many of the Africans who had been enslaved were freed and given land of their own. This, along with the introduction of Indian indentured laborers, led to the creation of the modern-day Trinidadian society. However, this was not the end of the story. In 1881, the British combined Trinidad with the neighboring island of Tobago to form the colony of Trinidad and Tobago. This new colony was a self-governing one with its own legislature and executive council. The British continued to exploit the natural resources of the islands for their own benefit, but they also began to invest in infrastructure projects such as roads, railways, and harbors. The discovery of oil in 1908 led to the rapid growth of the economy and the population. Finally, in 1946, Trinidad and Tobago gained full independence from the British Empire. Since then, the country has experienced significant political and social change. In 1976, Eric Williams, the first Prime Minister of independent Trinidad and Tobago, died. He was succeeded by Dr. Albert Gomez, who served as both Prime Minister and President from 1976 to 1981. In 1986, the People's National Movement came to power under the leadership of George Chambers. The economy grew rapidly during the 1980s and 1990s, thanks to the high prices of oil and gas on the world market. However, the country's fortunes have declined in recent years due to falling commodity prices. Today, Trinidad and Tobago is a highly developed country with a strong emphasis on education and healthcare. The literacy rate is nearly 100%, and there is a high standard of living for the majority of people. The country also has a vibrant arts and culture scene and is home to the world-famous Trinidad and Tobago Carnival. So that's a quick rundown of Trinidad's fascinating history. We've covered a lot of ground in just a few minutes, but this is just the tip of the iceberg. If you want to learn more about this beautiful island nation, then we highly recommend checking out the links in the description below. There you'll find a wealth of resources that will help you to understand the culture, people, and history of Trinidad and Tobago. Now it's your turn to share your thoughts on Trinidad. What are your experiences with this amazing place? What do you think makes it so unique and special? Share your thoughts in the comments below. As we come to the end of this episode, we want to thank you for joining us on this journey of discovery. If you enjoyed what you saw, then please don't forget to subscribe to our channel. Every week we bring you a new episode about an island, and we would love for you to be a part of our community. Thank you for watching, and we'll see you in the next episode.